Hey there, I'm Elise and welcome back to my real life in Korea. Today, continuing on the topic of interviews, I'll be going over the specific interview questions that you can expect to be asked. I'd really hate for you guys to miss out on any job opportunities simply because you didn't know what questions you'd be asked or have a chance to prepare your answers. So let's get real. But before we get into it, don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram for more advice, stories, and peeks into my real life in Korea. And if after watching this video, you're still looking for more personalized help, feel free to reach out for a one-on-one session with me. Alright, if you're curious about the interview process and all of the steps and stages for getting through that, be sure to check out my previous video where I outlined all of the different stages. In this video, I'm just going to be going over the different questions that you can expect to be asked. But before I get into the questions, first up, you're going to want to be prepared to memorize all of your answers. This is very common in Korea. A lot of applicants memorize their answers word for word, and they've practiced so much that they've even decided on how they're going to enunciate their words so that it sounds like they didn't memorize them. So it's like they've memorized and strategized how to say it as if they're an actor with a script. I personally don't like to do this. I feel like this is very unnatural, and for me I get uncomfortable because I'm more focused on remembering my lines than remembering what kind of points I want to touch on. So instead I tend to practice if I'm asked this, I will give this type of answer. If I'm asked that, I will give that type of answer. So I know the gist of what I want to say, and I'm comfortable with Korean at this point that I don't really need to practice in advance, but you do whatever feels comfortable for you. So getting into the questions, you're first going to want to be prepared to give a simple self-introduction, and these are usually timed. You'll be given 40 seconds to a minute to talk about yourself. So rather than give personal information like where you're from or what you like to do, you should be giving information that basically summarizes you as a professional and why you are suitable for this position. Let me give you an example of one of my answers from a position that I previously applied for and ultimately filled. And keep in mind that I'm answering the question for you guys in English, but I actually entered the question in Korean. Hi, my name is Elise Best, and I'm interviewing for the Webtoon editor position. There are two main ways I believe I prepared myself for this position. The first is through my long-term interest in translation. I started with translation projects during college, and that grew into me taking on translation assignments in my previous workplaces. The second is the many years I spent working as a teacher. This ensures that my English is grammatically accurate, and my eye for catching English errors has been sharpened over time. With these experiences, I hope to become a valuable member of this company. So I'm reading my answers because it's been a really long time since I did an interview. I'm not prepared. I did not practice. You're welcome to copy this format for your own self-introduction, but the point is to just give some points about yourself that apply to the position. Alright, so the next question that you can expect to be asked is what you know about the company and the industry that they are working in. This is especially common in entry-level positions because they already know that you don't really know deeply about the type of work that they do. They just want to check that you've done your homework and that you're actually interested in working for them. I can't really tell you how to answer this question specifically without knowing the company that you're applying to or the industry that you're trying to work in. But I would say in general to check the company's websites, make sure to check their apps, check out all the products that they offer, and if they're based in different countries, check out and do a comparison to how they work in different countries. That way, when you're giving your answer, you can also provide some insights. Maybe you would say what you noticed about the company that was different from competitors, or something that you noticed of the company that might have been lacking. So if you were to be hired, you would want to try to suggest this and that kind of change to improve on that. It's basically a confirmation of do you really want to work here, and show me how much you want to work here by showing me that you've done your research. So just to give you another example of how I've approached this, for one company I had actually prepared a PPT and printed it out and brought it to the interview, and it basically was like a full analysis of the company. I had done a SWOT analysis, so their strengths, their weaknesses, their opportunities, and whatever the T stands for, I don't remember right now. I had done a benchmarking page for all the competitors, and I had given a page of suggestions for everything that I thought that they could do in every part of the company to improve and be on par with the competitors. And I'm not gonna lie, this was overkill. You do not need to do this. Nope. But I really wanted that job, and I really wanted to crush the competition, and so I prepared this. Just definitely don't walk into the company not knowing anything about the company or not knowing anything about the industry. Big no. You will be quizzed and you will lose points if you cannot deliver. The next two common questions you can expect to get are what your past experiences are and why you want to work for this particular company. company. And again, these are going to be specific to the company, so I can't really tell you how to answer these questions, but keep in mind that this is like the meat of the interview. Like, this is the moment where you get to convince them why they should pick you, because you have this amazing track record and you really want to apply those skills to this company. Let's say you don't have any work experience, or let's just say you don't have any work experience in Korea, because Korea really only pays attention to work experience in the country.
Bruh.
You can always talk about your past volunteer experience or maybe past club activities. You can even talk about your experience being a church member. Just the point is to show the soft skills that you have if you don't have any hard skills from past work experience. Even if you don't know how to do the job, they want to know that you know how to work. So do you know how to show up on time? Do you know how to follow instructions? Do you know how to ask for help? Make sure that you tell some kind of story about yourself from whatever type of past experience you have to show that you are someone that is dependable, even if you still need to learn from the bottom. They're going to teach you anyway. The next very common question that you'll get here is where you see yourself in X number of years. Sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes it's 10 years. And basically, my advice for how to answer this question is to imply that you plan on working for the company until you die. Don't give any kind of honest answer like, oh, after getting more work experience, I hope to go back to graduate school and get my MBA. Don't say that. All the employer wants to know from this question is that you are passionate about the job and that you're passionate about their company and that you don't have plans to leave. So they're like able to confidently invest in you because you're going to be there for years and years. So I would just say that in X number of years, I see myself as a very solid member of this company, and I hope that my experience gained will have catapulted me into a higher position where I can continue to serve the company by doing blah blah blah. Like, just say whatever your goals were that you've already figured out when you were researching the company. This is another opportunity to iterate that you have those goals. Next, expect to be asked questions about your soft skills or your personality. So they might ask you how you work with others in a group, how you work individually, and how you deal with stress. Especially for foreigners, they might ask you questions to see if you're a good cultural fit. A lot of companies are worried about hiring foreigners. They think that we're a flight risk, or they think that we're going to have too much culture shock and end up quitting the job because we're just too stressed and frustrated. So be prepared to answer those kind of questions. One question you should definitely be prepared to answer is how you feel about overtime. Again, this is based on culture fit because a lot of Korean companies do have people working overtime. It's part of the work culture, unfortunately. So how you answer this question, I think, is going to depend on two things. The first is your past experience level, and the second is how much value you think that you can bring to the company. So if you're fresh out of college, you don't have work experience, this is your first job in Korea, unfortunately, I would tell you to just answer the question like, oh, I'm totally fine with working overtime, even if that's not true. And I hope that you don't end up having to do it, but you have to give like a team player kind of answer, or a positive, willing kind of answer that shows like, I understand the work culture in Korea and I'm totally fine with how that works. I'm ready to be in it. And if it does turn out that that company does have a lot of overtime, maybe just don't stay there for a super long time. You just need to build up some experience. But I would say that if you didn't already figure out if the company has overtime, now is not really the time to worry about it. Just give a positive answer for the sake of passing the interview. Then you can look up the company later, and if you find out like they're doing overtime and you're not down with that, you just withdraw your application. Now, let's say that you're someone on the other side of the range. You have a lot of work experience and you think that this position is something that like they can't easily find somebody else to do it. Then I think you can give a more honest answer. I tend to say things like, I like to lean toward efficiency, and so I try my best to get all of my work for the day done within the time frame that I'm supposed to be working. However, if I didn't meet my goals for the day, or if there's a big project and I know that it's not going to get done on time without me doing overtime, of course, at that point, I'm willing to work overtime. I'm willing to give my time for the sake of the project, for the sake of the team, for the sake of the company. So I've basically hinted that I don't want to work overtime and that I'm not going to be doing that unnecessarily. But if the situation calls for it, then of course I'm going to be responsible for my work. I don't think that this answer is particularly assertive, but when it comes to Korea, maybe this is a more assertive answer. Maybe it's more straightforward and more like American. So you need to think about like, what are you willing to risk? Like, how badly do you need this job? But if you're kind of in a power position, then you can say pretty much whatever you want to say. Now let's move on to a question that I think is a bit tougher to answer because there's some cultural nuance. And that question is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? So when it comes to Americans, and I can only speak for Americans, we tend to give a cop-out answer on the weakness. We give a strength that is actually disguised as a weakness, not a real weakness. And this is acceptable. This is basically expected. Why would I want to tell you anything bad about myself? But that's unfortunately not the way that it's done in Korea. And so I think this is where a lot of foreigners would lose points in the interview if you're not aware of this. In Korea, they really do give a weakness. And like, I struggled with this a lot when I first started applying for jobs in Korea. My friends and like professors who were checking my interview answers were always criticizing me on this. So I understand that it's not intuitive, but let me just give you the answer that I give. My weakness is that I'm someone who struggles to make decisions. And you would be like, why would you say that? Why would you tell the company that you can't make decisions? That's terrible. But the point of the question is for you to give follow-up on how you've tried to overcome this weakness. So my follow-up is that although I'm someone who struggles to make decisions, in order to compensate for this, I sit and make a pros and cons list so that I can get a different perspective on the situation and maybe make a decision more easily. But if I'm still struggling to make a decision, then I would consult my seniors and get their perspective so that, again, I can more easily make a decision, and then it would be an informed decision that I'm more confident with. So whatever weakness that you're prepared to talk about, just make sure that you've also come up with some steps that you've taken to compensate for this weakness. The point is to show that you are humble and also self-aware enough to know where you fall short so that you can try to catch yourself and like basically balance out where you fall short. But don't cop out. That's the point. Don't give an answer like, sometimes I just work too hard. I'm known to be a workaholic, and so my personal life can suffer. That's not a weakness. Another example of an answer not to give is something like, sometimes I just want to help people so much and I end up taking on a lot more work because I want to help my coworkers achieve the best work they can achieve. Again, the cop-out answer. Don't say something that actually implies that you have like positive skills to bring to the company. That's your strength. Now it's time for your weakness, and they want to hear a real weakness, so lean into it. Finally, a tough question to answer might be, what salary are you expecting? I've actually never had this asked in the first round of an interview. It's usually in the final round of the interview. So it's either like they've already basically decided they're going to hire me, or maybe it's between me and one other person. So they want to check what salary expectations you have. There are a few reasons that this is a tricky question to answer. The first is that you don't really get to know the range of salaries that they offer for other employees. In Korea, it's not illegal as a country, but like in a lot of Korean contracts, you've signed basically like a non-disclosure agreement on your salary. You're not allowed to talk about your salary. If you tell other coworkers your salary, you can be fired. It is totally legal to do that. So a lot of people don't talk about their salary. Even amongst my friends, I don't know a lot of what their salaries are. I might know in general, like a range, but I don't know their exact salary. Even if, let's say you're already working in the company and you want to renegotiate your salary, you can't say something like, oh, I heard such and such is making this salary and I think it's unfair that I'm making a lower salary than them, because now you've just exposed that you asked and the other person told, and both of you might get fired. So it's just very hard to know somebody's salary. The way that you can kind of get around this is if you get on websites like Job Planet or Blind and make a membership. These websites are like the equivalent of Glassdoor. So people might have put what their salary is anonymously, and they might have put what their position is or what their team is. So you might be able to find an example or a reference point for what the salary might be, and then ask for something around there. But there's a higher chance that you're going to be going into it completely blind. So what I would say is don't expect like an American level salary from a Korean company. The salary like ranges here are a lot lower, but so is the cost of living. So it's kind of relative. But anyway, just don't be like greedy. And the reason I say that is because also, unlike in America, if you ask for way more salary than the company is willing to pay, you might actually lose the position when you didn't need that salary anyway. Sometimes the company will simply say like, oh, I'm sorry, but we're unable to pay such a high salary, so I think you should look somewhere else. Like, it's not like they're offended, but it's like you've made an awkward situation by asking for something so unrealistic, and so they think that like you think that you're way too good for this company. So don't ask for something like you're like an entry level job in a cosmetics company and you're expecting to make like 80,000 USD worth of Korean won, like 80 million won a year. That's not gonna happen, and asking for that is only gonna hurt you. Unfortunately, they're not gonna come to you and be like, well, you asked for $80,000 a year, but we can only pay you $30,000 a year. Do you accept that? Like, you've made it embarrassing for them to even say such a thing. So anyway, you want to just like you want to aim higher than the range of salary that you might have found so that you get a better deal, but you don't want to go so high that you actually lose the job. So let's go back to the example. You're an entry level you're applying for an entry level position in a cosmetics company. If the company is well known, then you'll probably be able to expect something between 30 to 40 million dollars a year as your starting salary. So maybe you'd want to say that you want like 45 million a year so that you get an offer that's on the higher end of that 30 to 40 million range. And there are companies that will offer you less than that. I would not work for these companies. I think they're mostly going to be startups, and they're mostly going to be like kind of exploiting the fact that you're an entry level position, like aiming for an entry level position. And so they might offer like maybe like 26 million won per year. I don't think that you can even legally get a visa with such a low pay, so try to avoid these lowball companies. But anyway, that's the gist of what I can tell you for what you can expect from the salary without knowing the company or the industry. Some companies and industries will pay a lot more for the starting salary. It depends on your skills. So just try to do your research as best you can. The point is, don't get greedy. So overall, I would say that the interview questions are kind of what you could expect from any country's interview, but it does differ a bit in terms of the nuance of how you should go about answering certain questions. The questions that I've gone over this time are the regular, like standard questions that I think that you can expect, but there are times where the employer has decided to go totally off script and like be completely unhinged and ask questions that they should not have asked you. So in a future video, I'll be going over all of the crazy questions that I've gotten and heard of, and some of the crazy questions that I hope you don't get asked, but you could expect to be asked one day. And again, if after watching this video or any of my other videos, if you're still looking for more personalized help, feel free to reach out for a one-on-one session with me. And I'm sure after our chat, you'll be well on your way to your real life in Korea. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on Instagram so that you don't miss out on my next videos. As always, thanks for watching. Bye! 다음에 봐요!